All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Martha Alter Hines, and I am here today with Joe G, who is an astrologer and a multimedia artist. And I asked Joe to be with us today, to talk with me today, because for a lot of reasons, actually. But I first met you through Gemini Breath 2 years ago because I was holding the first of the 2 years in a row. I held the symposium called Rebecoming the One, and I had Gemini was one of the speakers, and I asked him, "Who do you recommend also to be a speaker?" And he said, "Oh, definitely you have to ask Joji. He's the best."
Aw,
So
that
it
is
was
too
so yeah,
kind.
it was so sweet. And so I did, and you said yes. And from pretty much the first minute or something when I met you, I just immediately liked you, like on a heart level. It was so quick that you are a person who is like high integrity and kind and thoughtful. And I had actually just gotten the same day I met with you 2 years ago, that earlier that day, I was on a call with someone else who was discussing a really similar topic with me, but was quite, I would say, aggressive and argumentative in a way that really didn't feel good for me. And then I got on the call with you, and you were actually saying very similar themes, like talking about very similar themes, but there was so much love in the way that you did it. And I will never forget that. That
Aw,
it's just like, wow, this is a gem of a human. So, yeah, so now you're in a moment where you are, I think, in a transition time, and you're launching some really beautiful projects, and including a YouTube channel. And my heart just, when I saw that you were doing that, it just immediately jumped and sang and felt like I
aw.
want to support what he's doing. I want to, yeah, I want to know more about it, and I want to support you. So that's why we're here.
Yeah,
Um,
well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Wonderful. So some people probably know you from Astrology Hub,
Yeah.
and yeah, and would you like to start by just, I think there are some different ways we're going to take this conversation, but would you like to start with just naming for us what is this new adventure that you're embarking on and why? And um
Yeah. I think I'm still figuring out the adventure as I go.
mhm.
Um, I've been talking about this a lot with my friends, and pardon me for talking about my chart. But I've been in a balsamic secondary progressed moon for the longest time. It feels like it's been forever. And just I think tomorrow is my official new moon.
Oh,
So I feel like I'm in that exploratory space where I'm like, ooh, this could be fun. That could be fun. So I'm doing a little bit of everything right now. But I think at the core of my practice, what I'm really trying to focus on is the content creation side of astrology and making astrology fun and approachable to at a very high level. So, because sometimes I feel like there's astrological topics that get very difficult for people to get into because it can be very intimidating, especially when you get past signs and houses and planets and you get into all those other things. It can go wild. But I think I'm very passionate about making those things seem as fun and entertaining and interesting as everything else. Um, and that's one of the reasons why we created the Astrology Channel. I created the Astrology Channel with Kyle Pierce, who's also an astrologer, and we're really passionate about creating. Our vision really was to create the History Channel of astrology, something that we can have documentaries, we can have game shows, we can have like fun one-off videos, but everything is like feeds people's curiosity, and I think that um that's really what I'm looking forward to do, like be the curiosity feeder.
yeah. I think it's so cool. I was saying the interview that we did together 2 years ago was on Mercury, and we're sitting here now in Gemini season. You know,
Right.
but you want to be the curiosity. Like it sounds like very Gemini energy.
Yes, I
And
do
the
have Mercury rising, so that's probably
mm,
why.
awesome. Yeah. It sounds so fun and so just with such beautiful intentions behind it.
Yeah, thank you,
Um,
thank you.
yeah. And so another thing that I find really interesting is that your approach to astrology in general, I would say, is pretty different from mine. And I was saying before we started recording that, my approach to astrology is, I would say, going more and more and more in its own way. I
Hmm.
have I have Uranus sitting exactly on my Jupiter right now. My own Jupiter is at
Oh, cool.
24 of Taurus in my ninth house, right? So it's like Uranus is like I'm getting lightning
Breaking that
bolts.
open.
What? What'd you say?
Just breaking that
Yeah.
worldview open.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so fun. Um, but what I really love about you and your work that actually fits really well with how I'm being called is it seems like part of what you're calling is um to bring people together and to bring differing ways of engaging together, which also is very Gemini in a lot of ways,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, and to not to move away from or to support us to not so much splinter off into that version of astrology or that version of a way of being a person, and to really hold space for us to be diverse and yet be together at the same time.
yeah.
Uh, yeah. Is there anything you feel like you want to say about that or how that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think as far as my approach to astrology goes, I think the reason why it's so easy for me to be able to welcome everything is because at the core of my philosophy of life is really animism. And when you talk about animism, we're really talking about every single thing, even concepts and ideas being alive. And if everything's alive, then everything is doing something in some sort of way. So I think that I'm not to use that I'm really passionate about this over and over and over again. But the reason why I'm really passionate about it is because it really, like you're saying, it really breaks your worldview open when you can start to see, like even the speakers that I'm using to listen to this is like alive. Like what kind of life is that? And to explore that in a very serious way, not just like, oh yeah, that's a cool idea, but like really treat everything in life like it's alive. And I think that when we really embrace that sort of worldview, it's harder to to go and say, as a traditional astrologer, oh, asteroids don't work just because we can't see them. It's like they might not work in the way that you think they should work, but because they exist, they're still alive. And if they're still alive, they're still doing something. What is that they're doing? That's the big question. Um, yeah, does that answer the question? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's the beginning of it. Yeah, definitely. There's so much more there, but yeah, I can just say for me, the more, the more, Uranus is on my Jupiter, the more my own way is just going in its own direction. I definitely can have the tendency in myself to feel frustrated with a more traditional way, and yet on the deepest level of myself, I don't want to feel separate, right? I don't want to splinter off from
Hmm.
other people and other things. And um so do you want to say a little about on your new YouTube channel, kind of I'm loving some of the ideas you were mentioning to me about how you're going to be holding space. There's going to be a game
Yeah.
show. There's going to be some.
Yes. So, Kyle and I have been building the astrology channel a brick at a time, but we have already planned a lot of the rest of the year. And one of the ideas that we had is to have um a game show that really taps into some of these disparities that astrologers might have just because they're trained in a certain school, or that they just like a certain style, or that a certain philosophy just vibes with them better. And to really kind of force everybody to maybe trade seats and try and think like the other person, to try and understand like, why does this person think that this is the truth? Or why is it that this thing works for that person, but it doesn't work for me? And so the idea that we had was a game show, a debate game show where astrologers would come in, and it's coming in September, where astrologers would come in. They would know the topic that they're debating, but they're not going to know what side of the debate they're going to be in until they're right there. So you
Really?
really have to like force yourself to really argue about something that you may not believe in. But I think in trying to do that, you're really again, you're breaking yourself open a little bit. You're expanding the of the perspective that you have, and you might not. I might not start using asteroids tomorrow just because I had this conversation, but maybe I'm gonna be slightly more open to them, or maybe I'll see the validity in somebody else using it. Because I think that one thing that's very much like a common thread, as far as this sort of astrological feud goes, I guess, is that people find the things that really work for them, and I think sometimes it's easy to feel like that's the way it should work for everybody. And it's really easy to just be like, that's just the way. It has worked for me all the time. I made all these predictions. I helped all these people, and it has worked. Then why shouldn't you be doing the same? But I think that when we try and force ourselves to use the thing that the other person's using, in their own terms, not our own terms, I think we can sometimes even learn things about our own practice that we didn't know could be there before. And I use asteroids as an example because that was very much an experience that I had very recently. I was always I was always very hesitant with this with asteroids because it's just so many of them, and I'm like, oh my God, how do you even like sit and pick which one to look at?
Mhm.
And at Norwalk, I went to a talk on asteroids, and just watching somebody use them in practice and really see and really sit with that framework, really sitting with that framework and sitting with the way that they approach it, and all the way that I would approach it, really made me see like, oh wow, like I understand how this works. Like it may not work for me. It might not fit into like my astrology sort of pipeline because I'm a very technical astrologer. Um, but but I see the validity in it. I see the depth, and I can understand why somebody might want to look at an asteroid versus like something like a lot, which is a traditional thing. Um, or why somebody would use any other thing for that matter instead of any other thing that I use. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And I use asteroids a ton. And I've taught
Nice.
people on it. Yeah. Um, and actually related to that, again, before we were recording, we started having a mini conversation that I would love to bring in here. Just it's like we're weaving in lots of different things, but I think it creates a tapestry that has a
Yeah.
coherency, hopefully. Um, but I was talking about the Oort cloud being that I've been really, really interested in lately, Lele Aku Hanua. And so I was saying before we started recording that that's really important to me as we're in relationship with just about, well, with anything in life, all the planets, but especially these beings who are just being discovered by astronomers. It's important to me to hold space for a multiplicity of truths in them or about them, and also to hold space in a way that it's a co-remembering of who they are, as opposed to one or two or three experts in the astrology world deciding it's a certain truth, and then we all, bow and go along with their truth. um and so you started talking about magic, and you started talking about um your own sense that Can you say a little bit about, you were talking about in traditional astrology, there's a certain moment where like the spirituality got maybe, or a certain part of astrology has taken out the spirituality, but then there's this importance to maybe hold it back together. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
want, I'm
no,
trying to say
definitely.
your words. You
No,
you
yeah,
go. Yeah.
totally. So what I was saying, and but before I got in, is that because traditional astrology became like academicized, it became like
Mhm.
this academic pursuit. It's very easy. It became very easy to just say these are the texts. We just follow the text. We don't have to do anything else. But if you actually go read the people who wrote those texts, they all lived in this very spiritual, animist living world. And I think that at least I see that in my own generation of traditional astrologers, that it's kind of like this Bible waving thing. So and so says this placement is this, and so this placement will always be this. And there's a lot of that going around. Um, but yeah, but what I was saying is that I really don't think that the astrologers of that time were approaching these things in the same way. Like it's especially when you get into astrological magic texts and even alchemy and things like that, there's always this spiritual exploration of the thing as well. Like even this takes me back to a thing that I actually did for Astrology Hub, where I did um fixed star class. But in my fixed star class, I barely gave people what the stars were all about. I gave like one or two keywords, but then as the month went on, every time the moon would be conjoined to a star, we'd have an activity to go outside and do something and say hello to the star. And like, what do you mean?
There you go.
Um, and
Exactly. Yeah.
yes, I love that approach to astrology because I think that those were the most profound experiences that I've had, even in trying to understand my own chart. And this is something that I always also um, encourage my clients to do to actually go out and interact with the sky at this time in this moment and and just say hello. Like for me, it was actually very interesting because before I taught that class for Astrology Hub, I was actually not a fixed star user that much. I knew about the fixed stars, but I never was really using them in my client work just because there's so many things to cover that you end up never getting to the fixed stars. But when I heard that Astrology Hub, no, actually, I hadn't even heard it at the time, but um, at that time I was starting to get interested in fixed stars. And so my thing is always if I'm gonna use a technique or if I'm gonna do anything, I should always apply it to my chart first and see how it works and how it makes me feel. And I have Procyon rising in my chart. I have my sun conjunct Procyon, and they're both rising together. And so I'm like, Procyon, okay, let's get to me Procyon. What does it mean? And when it comes to astrological magic, there's a tradition of images, and so I made an image for Procyon. I wrote a hymn, and during that time, um, close to sunset, you'd always see Procyon, Sirius, and then the twins in my night sky. And that's the patch of sky that was rising when I was born. And I went on a walk every day for like a week and just meditating on that view, like that literal patch of sky was rising just as I rose.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just
Exactly.
to like walk around and really just ask Procyon, like, hey, like what why? Why did you rise when I was rising? Like, what does that mean? And sometimes you're not gonna get any answers, and it's not gonna be like this crazy surreal thing. But other times it will be, and that time was one of those uh like very ineffable experiences where you're like you understand the thing, but you can't really explain in words what you just understood.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting because shortly after that, I got selected to do the class for Astrology Hub, and I was actually supposed to do the Leo month, but something happened that I actually ended up doing the Cancer month, and the Cancer month had a new moon conjunct Procyon. And so I did the whole class from with the moon starting with Procyon and going back to Procyon as like a journey. And I took everybody on the same journey that I had. And it was so cool to hear from people that because I made an image for each of the Bohemian fixed stars also. So people could have the image and then go out and walk and see the star if it was possible. And it was so cool to hear from people like, wow, like I looked at the image and that image just spoke to me so much. Like I feel like I understood my chart in a way that if somebody had told me what that meant, I wouldn't have quite gotten it. And I'm like, oh man, that's perfect. That's really what the job of an astrologer is, at least for me, to just help the person come to their own conclusions as opposed to being like, hey, like this is what's gonna happen. Although I do think that that's possible, especially with my traditional background. I do think that like the really hard-hitting predictions are not only a possibility, but they're kind of easy to get to if you really want to. But I'm not sure if that's really the most beneficial thing to get out of astrology. I don't think most people are ready for a prediction of the future and what the future is going to hold. Because I don't know, there's a part of it that there, even if it's like just a 0.0001% of free will that we do have, I think that that is already, even if it's a tiny fragment, it is just so powerful that um sometimes it's best off to just use it more as an exploration rather than like a dictionary where you just open and you know exactly what it's gonna mean and you know exactly what's gonna happen. Like what's the point of getting to know what's gonna happen tomorrow if you're here today? That's my whole thing.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't do prediction basically at all, at all. I mean, in a certain way, but not really.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what you're describing about the going and having your own relationship with Procyon, that is my thing. That is where I am. That's
Yeah.
exactly. And 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 actually Venus is a great example for me of that right now. Last month in the course, the astrology course that I'm teaching, we were on Taurus and Venus, and I started talking about the Venus cycle, and we're actually going to have a second month on Venus, which is where I'm going to really go into the Venus cycle. But what I feel called to do with regard to the Venus cycle is actually to to teach all the ways that I know about. You're right. Like there's so many different approaches to the Venus cycle, and I feel like there's no one right answer.
Yeah.
Like so for some people, when Venus is in the interior conjunction, so between the Earth and the Sun, that's when she's in the Inanna underworld. And for other people, it's the opposite. It's when she's in the superior conjunction that
Mhm.
she's in the underworld. And then there's the Ariel Gutman way, which is the Venus star point. It's like so many different ways to approach the same thing. And but what I really want to do is say, hey, here's how certain people think. Here's another way, and here's another way. Okay, but then let's go into our own relationship, our own like becoming Venus, because we are each, to me, we are each all of the planets, all of the asteroids, all of the everything. And so if we go deeply into ourselves and we become Venus, what's it like to be Venus doing this dance around the sun and then being between the earth and the sun versus on the outside of the sun, right? What does that actually like in our body? What does that feel like?
Yeah.
And then what comes alive is what comes alive. And it might actually feel one way today and another way 6 months from now. But it can all be held within a certain kind of container. So it's not just chaos of nothing and everything, but but there is room to be held to like come into your own truth. Like for you with Procyon, I feel like yeah, I've seen that so many times looking at people's charts and having them just feel into the moment they were born. Like let's say Venus was rising. So you're born, making this up, but let's say a person is
Yeah.
born in the middle of the night and Venus happens to be rising right that minute. And I can't know what that baby's soul felt, coming into the world in that moment. But the being I'm talking to on some level does know, because they were them. They were there.
Hmm.
Like, I wasn't there. They were there. And like you were there the minute you came out of your mom, and Procyon was rising. Your soul knows something that I can't possibly know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's so
I think what I like about that approach too is that you're blending the academic didactic approach of like here's
yeah,
the information, here's like the astronomy of it all, here's all the people and what they've said, but also the experiential side of things where it's like here's how this thing will be translated through you. Because I think it's very um I don't know, even disheartening sometimes to just approach astrology like everything is just a list of keywords.
yeah,
Because then I feel like we lose our own meanings in that. If you're just saying what somebody else said, even if what somebody else said works, um, at that point, they're reading the chart. It's like you're not reading chart. Like if you're really just following, I don't know, Abu Mashar to the T, and you're reading exactly like he did, you're channeling Abu Mashar. You're not reading it as yourself. And I think
yeah,
that there's space for those two things. I think there really is. But it's like that whole throwing the baby with the bathwater. I think
yeah.
we shouldn't do that. I think there's enough space in astrology, and in philosophy, really, because what we're doing is philosophizing, to both of these approaches, really.
Yeah. No, I love all of that. And then just throw in one more to add on one more thing, which also for me, I think a lot about children, and looking at children's charts, and just, future generations, because I have two children, first of
Hmm.
all, but also because I was a child therapist, and I've had a lot of people come to me actually quite traumatized by astrologers predicting things about their children's charts.
Hmm.
In a really, I would say, inappropriate, damaging way. Um, and something that I've just been kind of observing and trying to keep in mind is, on the one hand, exactly, I don't want to throw any babies out with any bathwater. I don't, like the traditions that come before us have wisdom because they've been used, and they have there's definitely wisdom there. We don't want to need to reinvent every single wheel, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, every soul that comes into this world is a brand new life. It might not be a brand new soul. Maybe this is a very old soul, but when for example, I had a friend who had a baby a few months ago, and I looked at her chart, and this baby has Pluto in the fourth house, and um, I think yeah, Pluto in Capricorn in the fourth house. And so from evolutionary astrology perspective, which is what I'm trained in, anytime I see, Pluto in the fourth house, Saturn in the fourth house, it's like, beep, that that could be a pretty difficult, potentially emotionally pretty difficult placement. But I know this baby's mom, and I know her dad, and I know the family situation. I'm like, and I could just feel the spirit of this baby. And I was like, hmm. I mean, maybe, I don't know. I have no idea, but I would bet you there's a completely new vibrational signature that's coming in with this being, that cannot maybe be captured by a traditional or even an evolutionary astrology way of typically conceiving of Pluto in the fourth house. Like normally we might think, oh wow, there's going to be all this deep emotional turmoil and maybe trauma, and I don't know, whatever. A lot of lessons around the emotional body. But maybe this baby, this spirit, is bringing in um, transformation of emotional intelligence, like just for the collective. I have no idea. Maybe it's a whole different thing that we've never even conceived of. And I feel like it's so important to hold space for the truth of the spirit and the being that we each are, to actually be itself, whatever that happens to be. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think it's also important for astrologers to recognize that they can be wrong.
Yes, 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 yes,
Like,
yes.
yes, you can know all the techniques, but you can't. And I think that that's something that we all should be a little bit more afraid of. Like the fact that we can say something that is wrong and is going to affect somebody for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Like maybe a 15-year-old comes to you for a reading and they want to know if they're going to get married, and you look at the chart and there's, I don't know, Saturn in the seventh house, and you're like, oh my God, you're not gonna get married. And then turns out they just get married to like an older person.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Or they're very
yeah,
committed to
so
it or whatever.
yeah.
Mhm.
I feel like holding the space for that, I think makes for much humbler astrologers. And I think that and that's why I think the role of astrology is really not prediction. I think it's good to know predictive astrology because then you can really sit with the breadth of experiences that somebody can have. And I think that's something that traditional astrology is really good at capturing, that like yes, there's awful things that happen to people, and there's the greatest and greatest of things that happen to people, and traditional astrology holds the space for both of those things. But that does not mean that you should say either or, even the greatest thing and even the worst thing. I think uh, even thinking about the Mercury talk that we've been having, and like Mercury in traditional astrology is the ruler of astrology, and Mercury is a psychopomp. It's carrying the souls to to the next realm, and I think that like the job of the astrologer is really more of that, to facilitate people navigating through their lives with maybe a little bit more of a roadmap than they would have if they were just on their own. But maybe we can give some like um not not necessarily predictions, but give them like, hey, here's the range of possibilities that you have. Like it's actually a lot more limited than most people think, because there's, yes, you can be anything that you want, but you're still here. I'm a believer that you're here for a reason, and you're gonna fulfill that reason whether you like it or not. And 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 I think just helping people figure out that reason for themselves is much more of a fulfilling job than just saying like, "Hey, you're gonna be a lawyer next year." It's like,
You
yeah,
might be a
maybe I
lawyer.
will.
Yeah.
Like,
You
how
might be a
does
lawyer
being a
now.
lawyer make me feel? Or
Mm,
like, what will
mhm.
I do as a lawyer? Like, what's the impact? And these are all things that I think are questions rather than answers that astrologer can provide, because I think a lot of the times um, clients come to us because they don't know the questions that they should be asking themselves, and it's really good for an astrologer to be able to reflect that back at them. But if we just give the answers without the questions, then we get clients that sometimes get answers that they never asked for, or things are like very damaging or traumatizing even. Even if they're true, like even if you do predict something awful is going to happen to this person tomorrow, even if that was true, you doing that is not changing any of it. It's not helping it either.
What's the
Um,
purpose? So, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think again, this kind of goes back for me to the whole letting go of needing to be the expert. Like if I had if I had a wish for the astrology world, or actually not just the whole world, is that I think that in so many ways, like in academia, in just the way the power structure of the world is structured at the moment, we've been in a time where being an expert is really valued, and that definitely does have value in it. But I think letting go of that is healing on many, many, many levels, because
Yeah.
yeah, I think when people come to us and they want an answer, we maybe feel a pressure to have an expert answer, which actually could be the opposite of what is called for.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
Sometimes they just need to know what question to ask. And it's
mm,
not even what question to ask you, the astrologers, like what question to ask them themselves, you know?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, my
beautiful.
whole thing is that um, no one person will there's no person that can read your chart better than you yourself. such a strong believer of that. Because I've also had readings with astrologers where I'm like, no thanks. I will make my own truth over
Oh,
here.
definitely. Yes.
Yeah. It's funny because I
Definitely.
actually on my first astrology reading actually I was already going into astrology readings because I wanted to be an astrologer, and the astrologer actually told me that I was not going to be an astrologer, and I said I'm gonna do it anyways.
How would they
And here
ever know
I
that? That makes no sense.
am.
What in the world? Yeah, no, I've heard way too many stories of way too many things being said to people that are just not good. And they took it to heart,
Yeah.
for 30 or 50 or 60 years. And let's not do that. Let's not do that to people. Not
That's the
cool.
thing that happens in readings too. It's like it's already a huge power imbalance. Like
Yes.
no matter who your client is, there's always going to be this like you, the astrologer, are the oracle. You know everything, even though you don't know everything. The client will still feel like you do. And I think it's really good for astrologers to always constantly remind the client, like, hey, like I'm just like you are. I am just as clueless. We can just help each other out figure
Yeah.
what all of this is.
Yeah. Exactly. Um, okay, so if you had like when you're sitting here in this moment, today is what, June 11th,
Mhm.
2024. And you're sitting here in this moment where you've started this YouTube channel and you're about to move across the country and you're embarking on this new world and your role in the world. Um, and you may or may not have an answer for this. I'm just curious. What's your vision of how would you like what's your wish for astrology moving forward, just in general, and your wish for your role, your part in it? What
Ooh,
I have for you?
those are big questions.
Yeah.
Um, my vision for the future of astrology. I really am interested, and this is a thing that I've talked with a couple of my peers also. I'm really interested in what the next wave of astrology is going to be.
Mm.
Um, and I'm hoping that it's going to be more of a mixture of everything that has come. I really do hope that this traditionalist revival is really just so we can grab bits and pieces of like that very strong foundation and strong techniques, but we bring a lot of um the artistic and creative approach of the modern approach to astrology. And I say artistic and creative, not to say psychological, because I think that um there's a lot of innovation with modern astrology from the 20th century onwards, where people are just like, hey, I don't know this. I'm just gonna figure it out and see if it works. And I love that.
Yeah.
I really hope that we don't get stuck in just trying to revive the past, but we continue to implement the past into our future astrology, whatever that astrology will be like.
Yeah.
Um, I also hope that we are much more comfortable with astrological magic because I think it's still one of those things where people love or hate, and there's a lot of um, astrological magic and magic in general sometimes gets a bad press. Because it seems like it's this thing where you're just trying to, especially if you get into the Renaissance magic of things, where you're like binding spirits to your will and you're forcing them to do things for you, and I'm really not into that.
No, no.
Um, but yeah, I really hope that we get to a world where astrology embraces the animist or the animism of it all, but also is still grounded in the foundation of our tradition, because I think that's also very important. My role in that is a big question that I still don't know. But I don't know. I feel like, if anything, my role is very much tied to astrological magic, I think. I'm wanting to go to school back to school again so I can pursue astrological magic in an academic level, just so I can feel equipped enough to talk about it with people who may be skeptical or people who might look down on it, and really like just really know my material. And I think that as I move towards that, what I want to do is make it so astrological magic, or just magic in general, doesn't seem like this evil thing, but it also doesn't seem like this opportunistic thing either, where because I think it's even though astrological magic has gotten a lot more popular these days, I think it became this very transactional thing. I think the or capitalist world that we have lived in has kind of made it into um, almost like this supermarket wholesale magic where you're just like, yeah, I'll do this for the spirit, or I'll do this for the star because I'll get this instead. And I'm like, how about we just get to know, like, what's the stars all about? That's my favorite thing to do. Like, yes, I'll do talismans for wealth or good health and all those things, but I think that to ask without first having built a relationship, because I really do think that these spirits can be very powerful. But to just ask, like, you wouldn't ask the president to give you all this money and you never talk to him. So why would you ask an all-powerful being up in the sky that has lived for thousands and thousands of years to give you a new job without even saying hello? So
Mhm.
I think that's, if anything, that'll be my role, to make it more of to bring to light the devotional aspect of astrological magic, because I think that when we can really appreciate these spirits, beings, whatever we want to call it, and not as other than, but as like a part of all everything, and we're all in this together. And we can build friendships with these things, and through that friendship, we can work together to achieve the things that we want. That is my vision, I guess, or my role in all of this.
It's beautiful. I love it. Yeah. And I love how from the outside a person could look at you and me and the way we typically approach astrology and think that we're in different camps kind of, right? But actually when we talk about it and really open up the conversation, it feels like we overlap like 70 to 80%.
Yeah, definitely.
Like really, really beautiful. Yeah, and I think our bottom line intention is pretty much the same thing, which is
Yeah, and I think that's true for most astrologers,
yeah,
if they
exactly.
were willing to just talk to each other.
Exactly. Just, I think the whole entire point of this conversation. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to bring in before we close?
Um, I don't know. I don't think so. I think if anything, I just want um I just hope this encourages people to get to know their charts in the same capacity that I have gotten to know my chart. Like actually do survey like what was the patch of sky that was rising when you were born, and try to go see it at night when all those stars are visible. It's honestly such a mind-blowing experience. You cannot even put it into words. How
Yeah.
beautiful that is, you know? To see the
Yeah.
like you're part of the like that whole thing as opposed to just like this tiny little thing
Yeah,
but
absolutely. It's actually so beautiful. And yeah, yes, I could just second that. I could go on and on, but yeah, I'll just second that. I agree. Yeah, so much. That's so much how I'm feeling called to be with people and be with the cosmos and all of it. Yeah,
yeah,
wonderful.
leave the
Um,
computer behind.
mhm,
Go actually see the chart that's like living out there, you know.
yeah, that we are part of. We
Yes.
literally come from, that we are in. Yeah. Um, so okay, so this new YouTube channel is called the Astrology-Channel.
The astrology
Yes.
channel, yes.
And I'll put the link for that here because there's another astrology channel that's not you. Um,
Yeah, the link is
and
actually pretty easy. It's youtube.com/@ the Astrology-Channel, and you're
Oh,
gonna
nice.
find it. Mhm.
Perfect. Okay, great. So I'll put that link here. And anything else? I mean, clearly, if people want to subscribe to your channel, that would be awesome because you're going to be having lots of things coming up, and it would be great to be involved from the beginning, right?
Mhm.
Um, is there anything else you're wanting to invite people into, or?
Yeah. Well, right now I'm also transitioning as far as like my readings go. I'm more and more working with other astrologers. And because I've gathered a lot of experience working for Astrology Hub and working for different astrologers, producing content, and like now making my own channel, I realized that that's something that I'm really passionate about, and I know that that's my my catchphrase of today.
No, that's awesome.
But but yeah, so for any astrologers out there who need help navigating this crazy world of social media and videos and all those things, if you don't know what to do, I do have open books right now. I have I think a 3 session program where we walk all the way through electing the best day for starting your channel to like figuring out what your audience might be like and what things you might be interested in. And even one thing that I also talked to you about that I really care for is the intersectionality of astrology with different things that we might be interested in. Like me myself, I'm an artist and a musician and also an astrologer, and I figured out how to make those things coexist in a very nice way. And I love helping other people do the same. So I have right now on my website, themercuryrising.com, a program that's built just for helping people come to that same conclusion for themselves and to walk out of these 3 sessions with a game plan for venturing out into the world of astrology content creation.
That is awesome. Um, yeah, super, super cool. I also love your art. And I don't know if I have heard much of your music. Do you have links to where people can see your art or access your
Yes, I
music?
would recommend going to the Astrology-Channel. The first video that we did is actually a feature-length video on Algol that ends with a musical piece that I wrote. It's a hymn to Algol. It's me singing and rapping and playing a whole bunch of instruments. It's actually pretty awesome. I'm so proud of it.
Mm, mm, mm.
So that's what I would recommend people check out. I'm also on Instagram as The Mercury Rise, where I was posting daily horoscopes, which will now become a show on my channel with Kyle very soon. But that's where you can keep up with my art stuff. I also have some talismans coming down the pipeline. I'm not ready to put them out into the world yet. I'm still I have a whole bunch of them, but I'm still nursing them into into life, I guess. But yeah.
Awesome. I'll put all the links here. So
Thank you.
cool. So good, Joe. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Yeah, of course. Thank you
Truly.
for having me. This was great.
Yeah. And most of all, I just want to reiterate this. Most of all, really, what I am so grateful about you is what I experience about your heart. That's just so pure. It's
Thank you.
like,
Thank
oh, it's so good.
you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's if we could all do one thing, it would be to be so pure, centered in our heart, right? Like whatever astrology we believe in or don't believe in or follow or don't follow or what, eh, it's really for me, that's the big priority is
Yeah.
coming from our hearts. You
Yeah, just remembering that we
absolutely,
truly are all in this together. Like there's
yeah,
no way to not be together.
really, like literally, for real. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.